When I was nearly 10 years old, I accompanied my mother to the local butcher shop. The shop was a small, unassuming place nestled between a grocery store and a laundromat, its windows perpetually fogged and smeared with traces of meat. Inside, the scent of fresh blood and spices hung thick in the air, an aroma that excited my young senses. I remember the way the butcher worked, deftly slicing pieces of mutton, his hands moving with a precision that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. The butcher, Mr. Hall, was a rotund man with a thick beard that caught flecks of blood as he worked. His apron was stained with various shades of red, a testament to his craft. He had an easy way with customers, chatting as he expertly wielded his knife, a glint of joy in his eye as he spoke of the best cuts for a Sunday roast. My mother would ask questions about recipes, and he'd respond with enthusiasm, while I stood transfixed, my heart racing. As I watched him, entranced, I felt an inexplicable thrill course through my veins. The glistening knife, the crimson splatters, the rhythmic thud of meat hitting the wooden block, it was a dance of life and death that sparked something deep within me. My mother's casual chatter faded into the background as I became fixated on the artistry of his craft. That day marked the beginning of a transformation within me. I left the butcher shop with my mind buzzing, a cacophony of thoughts swirling around the images I had witnessed. The butcher's skill, the way he coaxed life from the animal, became an obsession. I was fascinated, yet a whisper of something darker began to take root in my mind. A week later, emboldened by my fascination, I decided to replicate the butcher's methods at home. I sneaked into the kitchen, my heart racing with excitement and fear, my pulse pounding in my ears. My mother had gone grocery shopping, leaving me alone in the house. The anticipation was electric. I grabbed a chicken from the fridge, its innocent eyes staring back at me, blissfully unaware of the fate that awaited it. I could almost hear the butcher's voice guiding me through the motions, and with shaky hands, I took a knife from the drawer. As I made the first cut, the warm blood sprayed across my hands, and a euphoric thrill surged through me. For the next few moments, I felt invincible, powerful, like a god. The adrenaline rushed through me as I continued, each slice sending waves of joy crashing over me. It was intoxicating, the rush of life flowing from the creature as I took my first steps into a world I had only glimpsed before. I was captivated by the sound of the knife slicing through flesh, the wet squelch of blood pooling on the floor, and the sense of control that enveloped me. But then, as the reality of what I had done set in, the exhilaration faded. I was left with the weight of my actions. The joy transformed into something darker, a gnawing guilt that twisted in my gut. I felt different, as if a part of me had awakened that I could not fully comprehend. In the weeks that followed, I became more consumed by this new side of myself. I found pleasure in the grotesque, watching horror films late at night, reading about serial killers, and poring over the anatomy of animals in the library. I was drawn to stories of violence, intrigued by the motivations behind heinous acts. Each exploration fed the dark urges swirling within me, and I began to lose track of where the child ended and this new entity began. It was in school that I first felt the divide between my identities grow. I was a good student, attentive and polite, but during recess, I would watch my classmates play and fight, captivated by their innocence. One day, I saw two boys arguing over a toy. Instead of intervening, I stood back, feeling a twisted sense of excitement as their voices escalated. When one of the boys shoved the other to the ground, I felt a rush of adrenaline, an intoxicating thrill at the chaos unfolding before me. I quickly looked away, heart pounding, terrified of what I might be becoming. I often found myself standing in front of the mirror, looking deep into my own eyes, searching for answers that would never come. In the dim light, I swore I could see a flicker of something behind my own gaze, an insatiable hunger, a predator lurking beneath the surface. The battle between these two identities raged within me, leaving me feeling fragmented and confused. On particularly difficult nights, when the hunger became overwhelming, I would retreat into a haze, slipping away from reality. It was during these moments that I lost myself completely, succumbing to the allure of the darkness. I wandered the streets, drawn to alleyways and shadows, searching for something, someone, to satiate this growing urge. Then, one fateful night, I stumbled upon a stray dog. It was scruffy and scared, its ribs visible beneath its matted fur. I knelt down, reaching out to it, and as it approached, my heart raced with anticipation. I could feel the monster within me rising, a tidal wave of excitement crashing over me. I took the dog home, locking the door behind me. As I stood in the dim light of my kitchen, knife in hand, the laughter of the butcher echoed in my mind. With each slice, I could feel my humanity slipping further away, replaced by an insatiable need for the visceral thrill of life and death. I was both myself and something else, a duality battling for dominance. That night I lost track of time. Hours passed, and when I finally came to my senses, the kitchen was drenched in blood, my hands sticky and red. I stood frozen, horrified by what I had done, yet unable to quell the tide of exhilaration that washed over me. I felt alive in a way I had never known, a rush that was as intoxicating as it was horrifying. In the aftermath, as I cleaned up the remnants of my actions, I felt a cold detachment settling over me. It was as if I had become two people, one who recoiled in horror at the violence, and another who reveled in the power it brought. I was split, fractured between the innocent child I once was and the dark entity I had inadvertently nurtured. Days turned into weeks, and I could feel my mind teetering on the edge. I began to hear whispers in the dead of night, urging me to embrace the darkness fully, to stop hiding from the thrill. The duality within me fought relentlessly, each side trying to gain control. My schoolwork suffered, friendships dwindled, and my once bright future dimmed under the weight of my secret. Eventually, I sought help, but it was too late. The dark persona I had cultivated had seeped into every corner of my life, its tendrils wrapping around my psyche like a vice. Therapy sessions felt futile. The therapist could see the shadows lurking in my eyes, but I could no longer tell them apart. I had become the monster I feared, and no amount of counseling could heal the rift within me. In moments of clarity, I would remind myself of the child I once was, the innocent boy entranced by the butcher's art. But then the other side would laugh, a cruel and mocking sound that echoed through my mind. It was a reminder that I could never go back, that the blood on my hands had forever changed me. My life spiraled further into chaos. The nights grew longer, and the whispers became louder, guiding me toward darker paths. I began to find myself at the edges of society, drawn to those who lived in shadows, hardened souls who had seen too much, whose lives were marred by violence. They saw the darkness in me and welcomed it, feeding my urges with their stories of pain and brutality. Then, one fateful night, I was drawn into a world I had only glimpsed before. I found myself in a dingy bar, surrounded by people who wore their scars like badges of honor. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and desperation, and I felt a rush of exhilaration as I entered. I felt alive, embraced by the darkness that had become my constant companion. The crowd was animated, telling tales of fights and betrayals, their eyes glinting with the thrill of their experiences. As the night wore on, a man approached me. He was older, with deep lines etched into his face, and a cruel smile that sent a shiver down my spine. He leaned closer, his breath rancid, and whispered tales of the underground, a place where one could truly unleash their darker urges without judgment. I was captivated, hanging on to his every word as he painted a picture of violence and chaos, a world where the laws of humanity did not apply. I knew then that I had to enter this realm, to confront the monster within me and see how far I could go. The following week, I found myself at a clandestine gathering in an abandoned warehouse. The atmosphere was electric, pulsating with adrenaline and fear. I was among others who shared my darkness, and I could feel the primal energy coursing through the air. They reveled in the chaos, their laughter echoing against the cold concrete walls as they engaged in fights, reveling in the raw brutality of it all. I stepped into the center of the chaos, my heart racing. The thrill of the moment consumed me, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. In the heat of the fight, I could feel both sides of the battle within me collide, my old self and the darkness I had nurtured. As fists flew and blood spilled, I was exhilarated, caught in a whirlwind of raw power and adrenaline. The rush surged through me, amplifying my senses and drowning out the whispers that had haunted me for so long. I became a part of the violence, dancing on the edge of chaos, surrendering to the madness. In that moment, I realized that the lines between my identities had blurred beyond recognition. I was no longer just a boy who marveled at a butcher's craft. I was a creature born of that fascination, an embodiment of the very violence I had once feared. The thrill filled me, igniting a hunger that would never be sated. And as I stood amidst the chaos, with the echoes of laughter and pain ringing in my ears, I knew there was no turning back. I had crossed the threshold, stepping fully into the dark embrace of my true self, a predator finally unleashed. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who ends up in a therapist's office, sitting in a chair that feels too stiff, with someone staring at me like I'm about to unravel at any second. My name is Nathan Reed, and up until about 6 months ago, I thought my life was normal, I guess. I had a decent job at Hollis Financial as an accountant in Portsmouth, Ohio, a quiet life, nothing out of the ordinary. But then everything started to slip, slowly at first, like a subtle crack in glass. And it all began with a voice. It started one night after a stressful day at work. I had gotten into an argument with my boss, Steve. He's the kind of guy who thrives on control and has no problem letting you know when he's pissed off. I was behind on some reports, and he came down hard on me in front of the entire office. I tried to keep calm, but something in me snapped that day. When I got home, I slammed my door shut and sat down on the couch, still shaking from the confrontation. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft at first, like a whisper inside my head. "Don't let him get to you." I jumped, looking around my empty apartment. I lived alone, and I didn't leave the TV on. It was dead silent, but I could have sworn someone had spoken to me. I shook it off, thinking maybe I was still rattled from the day. But the voice, it didn't go away. Over the next few days, I heard it again and again. Always the same voice, a woman's voice, calm but authoritative. I started calling her Echo. She was always there, somewhere in the back of my mind, but not in a comforting way. More like she was watching, waiting. "Don't tell them," she'd say. "Don't let them know." At first, I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was just overworked, stressed out. It happens, right? People hear things when they're exhausted. But Echo was different. She wasn't just a passing thought. She stayed, and the more I tried to ignore her, the louder she got. It felt like she was burrowing into my head, whispering things I didn't want to hear, making me question my own sanity. One morning, about a week after I first heard her, I was getting ready for work, brushing my teeth in the bathroom mirror. Echo was silent for once, and I thought maybe she had finally left me alone. Then, out of nowhere, her voice echoed through my mind, sharp and sudden. "You can't trust anyone." I dropped my toothbrush. I stared at myself in the mirror, feeling like a stranger was looking back at me. That's when I started realizing something wasn't right, not with Echo, not with me. At work, I started to pull away from people. Conversations felt strange, like I wasn't fully present. Steve noticed, of course. He'd give me the sideways look, like he knew something was off. But what could I say? "Hey, I'm hearing voices." I didn't want to end up in a psychiatric ward. So I kept my mouth shut. Echo wasn't just in my head at work, though. She followed me everywhere. At home, on my way to the grocery store, even when I tried to sleep, she was there. Sometimes she'd be quiet for hours, and then, just when I thought I had peace, she'd start whispering again. "Don't trust her. She's watching you." It got to the point where I couldn't tell if Echo was trying to protect me or drive me insane. It was like she was trying to isolate me, make me paranoid. And honestly, it worked. I started questioning everyone, my coworkers, my friends, even my own thoughts. I was spiraling, but I couldn't stop it. That's how I ended up in that therapist's office. Her name was Dr. Lisa Morgan. She was the kind of woman who seemed too calm, too put together, like she could read you before you even opened your mouth. I hated it. I hated being vulnerable, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't talk to anyone else about Echo, and she was getting louder, more controlling. I needed help. Dr. Morgan started with the usual questions. Do you have a history of violence? No, I replied, more annoyed than I should have been. I'm a pacifist. She scribbled something down in her notebook. I didn't know what, and it made me anxious. I think she introduced herself when I first walked in, but honestly, I had already forgotten her name. I wasn't focusing well, not with Echo whispering in my ear, telling me to shut up. Do you ever consider harming yourself or others? Dr. Morgan asked. I almost laughed. Of course not. Seriously? I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. Who do you think I am? Some kind of lunatic? Don't tell her, Echo hissed. Her voice was sharper now, more insistent. She was behind me. I couldn't see her, but I could feel her presence, breathing down my neck. Don't tell her. Dr. Morgan's voice brought me back. Mr. Reed, are you okay? You seem distracted. I blinked and forced a smile. Sorry, what was the question? She looked at me with concern, like she was sizing me up, trying to decide if I was dangerous or just unstable. I asked if you ever hear voices, she said, her tone careful. No. No, of course not. I lied, my heart pounding. Don't tell her, Echo repeated, laughing this time, like it was all a game. I clenched my fists. God, did I say that out loud? Panic gripped me. Dr. Morgan tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. Then who were you telling to hush just now? I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I had spoken. I had let it slip. No one, I mumbled. Next question. Dr. Morgan wasn't buying it. She leaned forward, tapping her pen on the notepad. Mr. Reed, I can't help you if you're not honest with me. Do you understand that? To be honest, I liked Dr. Morgan. There was something calming about her, something I wanted to trust. She was kind, elegant, and stunningly beautiful. For a moment, I wanted to tell her everything. About Echo. About the fear that had been gnawing at me. But then what? I'd end up like all the others. Locked away. Forgotten. Mr. Reed? I looked up, realizing she was still waiting for an answer. I understand, I said, even though I didn't want to. Do you ever see things that aren't there? Her voice was soft now, like she was talking to a child. I hesitated. No. Why did you hesitate? She asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Don't tell her, Echo whispered again, her laughter growing louder in my head. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block her out, but it was no use. She was always there. Always watching. I wanted to run, to escape that room, but I knew it wouldn't help. Echo would follow me. She always did. What are you afraid of, Mr. Reed? Dr. Morgan's voice was firm, pulling me back to the present. I opened my eyes and stared at her. She looked at me like she was genuinely concerned, like she wanted to help me, but I couldn't let her in. If I did, what would happen to me? I can't say, I muttered. You can't, she said gently. You're safe here. No one can hurt you, but you have to help me help you. But I wasn't safe. I knew that. Echo wouldn't let me be safe. She would follow me, haunt me, no matter where I went or what I did. The truth was, I didn't know how much longer I could keep it together. I didn't know if I was already too far gone. I wanted to tell Dr. Morgan about the dark thoughts that had been creeping in, about the things Echo whispered to me late at night, when I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. But I couldn't. I didn't know what was real anymore. And I was terrified that if I spoke the truth, I'd end up like the others, just another forgotten patient in a hospital somewhere, staring at the walls, waiting for the darkness to take me. I was shy. Always had been. Growing up, I was the quiet girl in the corner, the one who blended into the wallpaper. My vibrant red hair, a riot of curls that tumbled down my back, was the only thing that ever truly stood out. It was a beacon, a target, in a sea of bland normality. I remember wishing for it to be brown, black, any color that wouldn't draw so much attention to me. I just wanted to disappear, to become invisible. But even in my attempts at blending in, there was a part of me that craved attention, craved a connection I never seemed to find. A part that desperately yearned to be seen, to be appreciated, to be loved. It was a fragile, hopeful part, a seedling of desire that constantly battled with the ingrained fear of rejection. It was a battle I lost more often than I won. School was a battlefield. The other kids never really accepted me. They pushed me into lockers, their laughter echoing in the cold, metallic space. Cruel whispers followed me like a shadow, cutting through my fragile confidence. The girls spread rumors, their words like poison darts aimed at my heart. The jocks, the popular boys, found my shyness a source of amusement. My crush, the boy whose smile had briefly made my heart skip a beat, joined in the chorus of mockery. They called me fat, called me ugly, their words etching deep wounds into my young soul. And then there was her. She was always there, lurking in the shadows of my mind, a constant, icy presence. Her voice, a chilling whisper in the back of my head, echoed the cruel words of the others. "You are ugly," she'd hiss, her icy blue eyes piercing through me. I learned to build walls, thick, impenetrable barriers to keep her out, to keep the pain at bay. I buried myself in books, found solace in the worlds crafted by others. I perfected my art, pouring my emotions onto canvas, hoping to find release in the vibrant colors. I excelled in my studies, hoping that knowledge would be my shield, my protection. But the walls, they were never truly strong enough. They were built on shifting sand, constantly threatened by the encroaching darkness. There were times, rare but devastating, when the walls would crumble, and she would break through. My reflection stares back at me through the bathroom mirror. My desk red hair tumbles down my back in waves. It covers half of my face, her face. My bright blue eye stares back, the same color as hers, the same intensity. It looks over my high cheekbones and full lips, my strong nose and sharp jawline. My makeup stool looks perfect and untouched. Everything I am not. I take a makeup wipe and wipe off all the makeup covering the side of my face that's not hidden by my hair. Then I pull my hair back and compare both halves of my face. My blue eyes flicker, and I know she's there. Judging everything I think. Everything I do. I remember a time when I didn't have to worry about her judging me. I remember when I had the other kids at school that did it for her. They pushed me into lockers and cat-called when I walked past. The girls spread rumors about me, the jocks laughed. My crush laughed at me. They called me fat. Called me ugly. "You are ugly," she whispers through my head, her voice like shards of ice. The walls I built around me, the walls to keep her out, suddenly start collapsing and I am stuck, laying bare before her ice-cold blue eyes. The emotional pain is so much that my eyes swell with tears, but she catches them quickly. She'll drown me with them later. The line between us has always been a blurry one, a shifting landscape where reality and delusion intertwine. Sometimes, I feel like two separate entities sharing the same body, a bizarre duet of opposing emotions. One part of me craves connection, desperately seeks love and acceptance. The other, the voice of my tormentor, revels in isolation and the pain it inflicts. She thrives on my insecurity, my fear. She feeds on my tears, my self-doubt. She whispers doubts, fuels anxieties, twists my thoughts into knots of despair. I'm trapped in a constant battle for control, a struggle for the very essence of my being. I've tried everything to silence her. Therapy, medication, mindfulness exercises. I've sought help from doctors, psychiatrists, spiritual guides. They've tried their best, offering coping mechanisms, tools to manage the chaos within. But the truth is, she's a part of me. A dark, unwelcome part, but a part nonetheless. There are moments when she fades, when the world feels calm, and I can function normally. I cherish those moments, cling to them like life rafts in a stormy sea. I work, I paint, I even try to make friends. But there are always times when she surfaces, her cold stare chilling me to the bone. The other day, I was at a coffee shop, attempting to read a book in peace. I saw a young girl, maybe 12 or 13, with hair like mine, bright red and wild. She was sitting alone, her shoulders slumped, a look of deep sadness in her eyes. I saw myself in her, the awkward, shy girl who just wanted to belong. I wanted to go over to her, to tell her that she wasn't alone, that it gets better. But before I could muster the courage, she was gone. The image of that girl, and the memory of my own struggles, stirred something within me. A flicker of defiance, a spark of courage. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to coexist with her. Not defeat her, not silence her, but find a way to integrate her, to understand her. It's a terrifying thought to accept the darkness within. To acknowledge that the source of my pain is an intrinsic part of me. But it's also a possibility, a path towards healing. I need to understand what drives her, what fuels her rage. I start journaling, a way to communicate with her, to understand her motivations. I begin to visualize her as a separate entity, a different person sharing my body. I try to treat her with compassion, even though it feels unnatural, terrifying. The process is slow, agonizing. There are days when she fights back, her icy grip tightening on my thoughts, my actions. There are days when I feel like I'm losing the battle. But I continue, I persist. I finally start to understand her. She's the embodiment of all the pain I've endured, the fear, the rejection, the loneliness. She's a shield, a defense mechanism created to protect me from further hurt. In her own twisted way, she's trying to keep me safe. It's a revelation, a bittersweet understanding. I don't condone her actions, her cruelty, but I can finally see her as a part of me, a consequence of a life filled with hardship. I know this journey won't be easy. There will be setbacks, moments when she gains control, when the darkness threatens to consume me. But now, I have a glimmer of hope. A hope that I can learn to coexist with her, to find a way to integrate her into the fabric of who I am. The battle continues, but now I'm fighting with a renewed sense of purpose, a newfound understanding. I may never fully conquer the darkness, but I can learn to live with it, to manage it, to embrace the complexities that make me who I am. My red hair still tumbles down my back, a fiery reminder of the battles I've fought, the struggles I've endured. But now, as I look in the mirror, I see not just the dark, cold gaze of my inner tormentor, but also the flicker of resilience, the strength of a survivor. And that, I realize, is my true reflection.